Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter, and I'm really glad you could join us today because the story I'm about to share with you is not only real and compelling, it's incredibly inspiring. The amazing woman at the center of it all overcame a lifetime of almost unimaginable struggles and setbacks, beginning at a very early age. She saw both her mother and her beloved younger brother die of drug overdoses, watched her father descend into alcohol in prison, lived through horrific abuse at the hands of trusted adults, and succumbed herself to years and years of drug addiction, incarceration, homelessness, and 7 unsuccessful stints in rehab. Yet somehow, she came out whole. Stay with us. Crystal, thank you for being on My Healthy Mind today.
Thank you for having me.
Crystal, when we talked earlier, I must admit that I was surprised that you don't look like what you have been through. How is that possible?
It was extremely difficult growing up in an addicted home and the trials and tribulations I had with addiction and recovery. But it's one step at a time. I now have 15 years of abstinence-based recovery.
15 years, that's a long time. How early did your addiction start?
My experience with addiction started from the very beginning. I was born into a family where both of my parents were addicted to substances. I'm the oldest out of 7 kids, so I was parentified at a very young age. I knew the tragedy that addiction can bring to families and homes. Some of the consequences of that is growing up with insecure housing. We moved every few months. There were times we were homeless and all of us children were living in cars or tents. In the interim, going in and out of foster care was extremely difficult and the upheaval that creates. So I knew what addiction was from the very beginning. It was an undertone of every aspect of my life, and I despised it and swore that would never be me when I was accountable for my own life and my own circumstances. When I was 5, my parents separated, which really seemed to be for the better. My earliest memories are of my father pushing my mother down the stairs as she was holding me and big pregnant with my brother, which is 3 years younger than me, or ruining holidays by being intoxicated and belligerent. So when my mother and father broke up at 5 years old, to me, that was a relief. At that point in time, we moved in with my aunt, and that was really exciting to me. I had cousins, and it was a lot of people in the house, but it seemed like I was hopeful for it. We had a babysitter that had lived with us at that point in time that watched my cousins and I when my mom and aunt went to work, and he had molested all of us children. There was 5 children, myself, my brother, and my 3 cousins, and that went on for months. And as a 5-year-old, I really assumed responsibility for that in some way, felt that I had done something wrong. I did not tell my mother. My older cousin is the one that got honest about it. And I carried that shame with me that I should have done something different, or in some way, shape, or form, I had caused this to happen. Shortly after that, my mother's substance use really started to increase. She started to drink problematically and be noticeably intoxicated and unavailable. And that perpetuated the sense of internalized guilt and shame, as if I had caused her alcoholism and dependency.
And how did the foster care come into play?
Me and my siblings were in and out of foster care several different times as the state would get involved, as you have a whole family living at a campground or living in a vehicle, and naturally, the state gets called in to ensure the health and safety of the children are taken care of. We always did get placed back with our mother or father, but we I think I was in foster care 3 or 4 different times, and it was pretty short each time. My mother had 7 children, my father had 2, I had 1 fully biological brother, and it was always him and I as we whirled in and out of foster care and from our dads to our moms and homelessness. And what I will say is I'm immensely grateful that through all the trials and tribulations of my youth that I had an ally and someone there with me. And it gave me purpose. My job was to take care of him and take care of my siblings to some degree.
Now, how old were you when this was all happening?
The foster care experience probably started about 7 and lasted till I was 9 or 10 years old. The depravity that I was experiencing at home during that time, I almost welcomed foster care. I was on a hope and a prayer that someone would save me from my circumstances. There was regular domestic violence going on in the home. My parents were addicted to cocaine, so having money for food was an inconsistent occurrence. So we were regularly just scavenging to survive. They would just be missing for several days at a time. The standard, I'm going to get milk and then you never come back. By the age of 12, I was smoking marijuana and drinking and never seen that to be problematic. I never seen how that would lead to addiction. Although many of the adults around me were addicted, it seemed to be a moral choice. Like if you wanted to quit hard enough and had enough motivation, you could stop. I never knew of the disease model. So when I started to pick up substances, I didn't realize the quick progression of moving to pills and then heavier narcotics. When I was 14 years old, I moved out of the house. The first opportunity I got, and it really felt like my opportunity to make it for myself. I moved in with my boyfriend. I was known in high school as the keg stand queen, and I took a lot of pride in that I could drink more than most people and still maintain composure. And I didn't see how that quickly could lead to addiction and dependency. My junior year, I got transferred to an alternative high school, which worked really well for me. They had off-campus lunches where you could go and smoke cigarettes or other things. By the time I was 17, I was in my first treatment center and I was an IV drug user.
How did you get past that and still graduate high school?
I had a lot of people in my life that showed me kindness, whether it was my friends' parents or teachers at school. I think because I was able to communicate well, because people look at me and see opportunity because of the color of my skin or how I present, that people invested in me in ways that were impactful. They told me they believed in me, that I was capable of doing something more and being something more and outgrowing my circumstances, and I believed them. I didn't believe it for me. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew some way, someday, somehow that there was going to be opportunity for me, and I set out with vigor. I was never afraid of hard work. Growing up with impoverished circumstances, I wouldn't hesitate to grab a rake and go and rake neighbors' yards to make money or offer to clean someone's house. I've always been extremely resourceful. I worked 2 jobs all the way through high school. I graduated at 17, and that felt like my golden opportunity. I always had the understanding that education was the key to getting out of poverty, that if I wanted something better for myself, I had to do something better, something different. Neither of my parents were educated, and that seemed like the opportunity to move forward. I quickly realized that my substance use was getting in the way of my education, and that started 5 years of very heavy dependency on substances.
Next time you need to see a doctor, don't go to a doctor. Call Team Wellness Online. With Team Wellness Online, you can see a doctor or a therapist without waiting, usually within 24 hours. Your televisit is private and 100% secure, and you can take all the time you want. So next time you need to see a doctor or therapist, call Team Wellness Online at 888-813-TEAM to make a virtual appointment, and we'll come to you.
So you were going through this at a really young age. How are you feeling about all of this internally?
Growing up, I would say the most prevalent feeling was one of loneliness. I just didn't understand why no adults came in and saved us kids. Aunts, uncles, the foster care system, it seemed like any opportunity or hope of an adult seeing the depravity and abuse and neglect that was going on, no one intervened, and it felt extremely lonely, and at points in time led to the narrative of why me? Why me when my friends get a normal family, or a family that eats dinner together, or two parents that go to work or get to take family vacations? Why was I born into a family where there's this level of dysfunction that really is almost intolerable? And I never blamed anyone else for being born into a family of privilege, but it really made me feel like the cards just fall however they may fall. As a child, you're completely at the whim of the adults around you, and that's scary. You know, when you don't have safety and you don't have your basic needs met, it's very scary.
And then as you turned 18, looking for a change, you were going to move to Florida, and then a new trauma was introduced.
So at 18 years old, at that point in time, I was both selling and using heavy narcotics and was an IV drug user. My father, which was recently released from prison, was trying to rebuild a relationship with me. He was a heavy drinker, but not a heavy user. I was getting ready to move to Florida to try to outrun my addiction, right? Just get away, new state, new circumstances, new me kind of thing. That evening before I left, my father wanted to spend some time with me. He had already drank a fifth at that point in time, and in an act of solidarity, bought me substances and used some heroin himself. He ended up having a fatal overdose at my house on my couch that evening, and that was the first time I had considered getting sober.
And you still moved away?
I did. I was there a little bit over a year in the same circumstances, and I still ended up finding heavy narcotics. I was selling to meet my own addiction needs. I really wanted to scapegoat my substance use on circumstances, you know, that instead of the state and friends, it was my boyfriend, it was the this, the that. And the reality is, by the time I left Florida, I was very clear that the problem resided within me. It was the first moment of clarity that I had around my substance use and my responsibility in that. And that was one morning I woke up and there was a domestic violence situation with my partner the night before, and you know, it's dramatic. There's blood all over and clothes all over, and I had that moment of realization that I was just like my parents.
And was that the catalyst for your first attempt at rehab?
It was a catalyst for me coming back to Michigan and attempting to stay sober on my own, which I was very unsuccessful at. The next 3 years after that, I rolled in and out of treatment centers and incarceration. When I was 21 years old, I got incarcerated for 9 months. And before I got incarcerated, my closest friend purchased some heroin and had shared it with my little brother. So the day after I got incarcerated, my little brother had a fatal overdose, and he was my best friend. Him and I experienced everything together, including homelessness and hunger and in foster care, and it was always him and I. I couldn't count on my parents, but I could always count on him. And in that moment of loss, I knew that I had to get away from substances. I went to 12-step meetings that were in the jail. I prayed. I had heard spirituality was key. I was reading the Bible. I was doing everything I could to set myself up for success when I got out. And I was out 2 months, and I ended up, using again because the pain is great, right? Drugs and alcohol were not my problem. They were my solution to the fear, the guilt, the shame, the remorse, all those things. And then I had used for 3 months before getting sober and staying sober. And I had a moment before I got sober this last time. And I just remember thinking, it don't matter if I use 1 more time or 100 more times, like the pain isn't going away. And I called a local treatment center, and I was able to get in the day after. And although I wanted to be sober more than anything, I still drank on my way into treatment. And it just, it's such an insidious illness.
So you were still putting forth this effort to stop, but
I couldn't. I could not stop, and I tried with all of my might, and I tried everything that I knew possible. It didn't matter how much fear it brought me, legal consequences, the broken relationships, the lost hopes and aspirations. I could not on my own stop using substances, although it went against everything I believed in.
And how many attempts at treatment did you, and I mean formal treatment centers?
Mm-hmm. I went to 7 treatment centers before I was able to sustain recovery. The previous 6, I couldn't make it through a 21-day program because I was always seeking something to feel better. For me, I was an intravenous user of heroin and crack cocaine, and you take that away and there's this void, and reality hurts so much when you haven't had to deal with it. So anything, whether it's attention or gambling, sex, food, any of those things that make someone feel good, you just want more. You just want to feel okay. And not that drugs and alcohol take away all those circumstances. They do numb it.
When did you finally realize that, okay, this is the one, now I'm successful? After number 6, what was it that was happening with you then?
Drugs quit working. Alcohol quit working. It no longer numbed the pain. I would use, and before I would get at least a moment of oblivion, and all I could think about was how I was squandering my days when my father and brother have already overdosed and lost their life, how I had an opportunity at something better and I wasn't living up to my potential. It was this constant narrative of guilt. It no longer took any of that away. It just perpetuated it. It kind of turned on me. What was my primary coping mechanism then made problems worse.
Have you seen that in others now, that same kind of catalyst is there for them to realize it's time to quit?
Absolutely. It takes something different for everyone. Recovery is a very individualized process, and so are the circumstances surrounding that. But usually there is a catalyst that motivates somebody to get sober. And if drugs and alcohol were a viable solution to the problem, then people would continue to do it. But eventually it no longer works. What was fun and you got relief, or it was social lubricant, or whatever the motivation was to continue to use and use more, it depreciates. And the consequences of use or drinking just continue to build up.
So you've been sober for 15 years.
I have.
When you hear that, how does that make you feel?
I'm astonished. I'm astonished. I was a really bad client when I went to treatment before. I had many failed attempts. I seen other people do it, but I thought, given my background, the way I grew up, I was just too far gone. You know, it was impossible for me, and it's not. It's not impossible for me, and it's not impossible for others.
So now you're happy, healthy, being very productive in your life, but you've gone through such a traumatic history. How do you keep yourself on track? How do you do it today?
That is the question that so many ask when I share of my story. I would say it's one step at a time. So where I am today is not where I started. I went back to school when I had 9 months sober. I started with one class because I was not confident that I could either pass or stay sober. I was pretty concerned about my success and ability, but I succeeded with a 4.0. And then I took 2 classes and then full-time. And I eventually graduated from University of Michigan and had a 4.2 undergrad, 4.0 for my master's, and have a minor. I became a published author in my educational career for a scientific research article. I did a study abroad in Jamaica, which was extraordinary, to become cultured, to get a passport, to seize opportunities that I never thought were possible to me. It truly changed who I was each and every step of the way. In school, I have very close relationship with my advisors. In my marriage, I have individuals around me whose marriage I want to emulate. In my profession, I surround myself with mentors and people that I want to model my career after. I don't have all the answers, but I ask a lot of questions, and that takes a certain amount of mindfulness as you broach something new, a certain amount of courage. And that don't mean I'm not scared every single step of the way. That means that I am willing to work through that fear, to take action regardless of how I'm feeling about something. If there's an opportunity that is presented to me, I take advantage of it because you never know what's going to be on the other side. It's an extraordinary journey, extraordinary, and I get to be of service to a lot of people. So I have 15 years in 12-step abstinence-based recovery. I still go to meetings every week. I still have a sponsor. I sponsor a group of amazing women. That is, to me, that is everything, right? Asking for help, giving help, asking for help, giving help. And that's the way it is, not just in my recovery, but in every area. I need help in every identity I have because I don't have all the answers. I know the path I've traveled. I can offer insight and guidance from my past experience, but I need assistance to get where I'm going. You know, I have a beautiful home that I own. I have an amazing social network. It's moments like that, the peace, the joy, the security, where it's like, I did it for myself. Another key element is when I get to be of service to others. To me, that is such an important keystone of my recovery. When I get to build someone else up, when you see hope just gleam in their eyes, when you see somebody feel that they don't believe they can do it, but you believe they can do it and they trust in you, I did it, right? That is what keeps me going.
Now, you were 13 years sober and your mom passed.
Correct.
How did you not go back? And how does a person, like, what can you give a person today to say, here's how I made sure I didn't go back?
I would say I had a really solid foundation at that point in time, which not everyone has when tragedy hits their life. My mother was sober for 2 years before she passed away, and I got to see her. You know, she got to be a grandmother. She got to be there when my daughter was born. Recovery gave me something with her I never thought I would have. Recovery, as I believe in it, has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams.
I really admire your tenacity. You've been through it. And I mean, you've tried, you failed, you tried again, failed again. And no matter how many times you failed, we're looking at a success story today. your life as an advocate for others and making sure that they have a chance at this same recovery. How is that possible? What would you say to this audience to say, here's what I want you to know, if nothing else?
Do not give up. If you are not failing, you are not trying. None of us are going to succeed the first time. You are worth investing in. No one else can invest in you like you can. And that takes hard work. And that means, not every time is going to be a success, but you will never get to your goals if you don't try. Surround yourself with people that believe in you and support you and pursue your passions and the things that put you on fire. Don't just go with the mundane because it's familiar and it's comfortable. What lights you up? Where is your fire? In those days you feel you don't have it, that's why it's so important to surround yourself with great people that are like-minded, that build you up. So everyone is capable of having freedom, and that is my ultimate goal. Being an advocate is great. Being a woman of recovery is extraordinary. Being a mother and a wife and all this, but it's the freedom that means the most to me. I am no longer bound by addiction. I am no longer bound by my childhood experiences. I am a free woman.
My job was causing me so much stress.
I felt disconnected and frightened.
I felt so isolated.
I was beginning to feel trapped, depressed. I never expected that to happen to me.
We think nobody else feels the pain that we feel, but that is so untrue.
It's good to be able to talk about it.
I was able to seek help. I found it from Team Wellness.
It's a sense of freedom.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
Thank you for being with us today as we shared the amazing, perilous journey of Crystal Ducia, who, despite all the long odds against her, never gave up on herself. If you'd like to learn more about this or any mental health issue, visit us on our website at myhealthymind.com, on Facebook at My Healthy Mind Show, and on X. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. If you missed any of our past episodes, you can view them on YouTube. You'll find a complete list on our website. And as you follow us on Facebook and X, please feel free to comment and to suggest ideas for new shows.